Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Game Logic from the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube, one of the co-hosts of the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube, back with another episode of Talking About Games, or TAG, as I sometimes refer to it. This is episode number 11 for the 5th of August, 2024. So without much further ado, let's get to it. If you haven't been to the show and you aren't familiar with the show's format, main reason I do this show is it's to be something separate from the Basement Radio Arcade podcast, also something separate from the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast, because I don't have exclusive control over the agendas on those shows. So, I'm a participant, I get input into it, but I don't necessarily get an opportunity to go into all of the hyper-specific things that I'm personally interested in. And in addition to that, one of the things that I like to do is when it comes to the finances and the technology, software engineering, software development, and some of the history of the gaming industry, I do like to go and do some additional research. And we don't always have time during those shows, with the multiple panel members, to let a topic breathe as much as I would like to get into certain specific details. So I kind of do my own thing here on TAG, or Talking About Games. We'll probably go for about an hour-ish. I'm going to try and keep it a little short tonight because I am exhausted. I didn't get a chance to take my old man's nap this afternoon. So, and I'm also working without a teleprompter tonight, and it's going to be a little janky because I've got more videos than I normally want to show than usual. And so I also don't have the text up on the screen for some of the articles that I want to get into. So the first one, because it is a solo podcast, I do also take breaks to get something to drink, just to stay hydrated or caffeinated, and both during the show. So one of the first things that I want to get into is I want to talk about the strike that's going on in the video games industry. So this is one of these switcheroos where it's going to take me a couple minutes to a few seconds to rearrange all the things that I need to rearrange on the screen. So give me a second. Okay, so while I'm going through this news story, I'm going to let this video play in the background. I'm not going to pull the audio because I do strongly encourage you to go over and watch this video on More Perfect Union, which I guess is a YouTube channel about union activities in the U.S. It's really interesting if you kind of go through this whole video and kind of watch this thing unpacked. But I'm going to go through the news story itself. So this news article over on the Associated Press. I was trying to see which subsection it was in, but video game performers protest unregulated AI use at Warner Brothers Studios. The story by Sarah Parvini and Caitlin Wamani. Is from August 1st. More than 300 video game performers and Hollywood actors picketed in front of the Warner Brothers Studios building on Thursday to protest against what they call an unwillingness from top gaming companies to protect union voice actors and motion capture workers, equally against the unregulated use of artificial intelligence. Standing before the crowd, Duncan Crabtree, Ireland, National Executive Director of the Screen Actors Guild American Federation. I think you just saw him on screen there. National Executive Director of the Screen Actors Guild American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, SAG-AFTRA, said that AI has become the most challenging issue in many of the union's negotiations. And I just want to read out his one quote here. We've made deals with the studios and streamers, and by streamers he means the live streaming channels. So you're like your Netflix, etc. We've made deals without a strike with the major record labels and with countless other employers, which provide for informed consent and fair compensation for our members, he told the Associated Press. And yet, for some reason, the video game companies refuse to do that, and that's what's going to be their undoing. So some of the additional information I pulled together here. So these guys are picketing in front of Warner Brothers, which is one of the major video game companies that they are in negotiations with to try and get this topic attended to. So just because I went over, I think, some of the WB IE or WB Games structure a few episodes ago when we were talking about Suicide Squad and the Warner Brothers earnings and what was going on as that sub division within Warner Brothers Discovery. So I just want to go back over that corporate structure again. So Warner Brothers, the Warner Brothers structure inside the WB, Warner Brothers Games, formerly Warner Brothers Interactive Entertainment, or WBIE, is part of the Warner Brothers Global Streaming and Interactive Entertainment division of the Warner Brothers Discovery Corporation. Originally formed as WBIE in January of 2004 under Warner Brothers Entertainment Corporation, Warner Brothers Games includes TT Games, which is a formation of a merger of a couple different organizations, but primarily most of their DNA comes from the former studio called Traveler's Tales, and their bread and butter is really that's the studio that does the Lego games. Also consists of Rocksteady, NetherRealm, who of course is the Mortal Kombat studio, Monolith Studios, which one of my top 5 favorite studios of all time, predominantly known for No One Lives Forever and No One Lives Forever 2, although the generation of current gamers probably isn't as familiar with those titles. Also, the guys who did Aliens vs. Predator 2, also most current gamers probably not very familiar with those, and the Fear series, or at least the first 2 iterations of that. Titles that people may be more familiar with were the Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War, and currently they are working on an unnamed Wonder Woman title. Also consists of WB Games Boston, who they're basically a big MMO studio, so they've done Asheron's Call, D&D Online, Loader Online, and now they're working on some mobile games. Avalanche Software, who are the Hogwarts Legacy people, and as I mentioned before a few episodes ago when we were talking about some union activity within this, I think, Norwegian studio, or maybe Swedish studio. The studio they are often confused with Avalanche Studios, who are the Just Cause people. So don't confuse Avalanche Software, which is a Warner Brothers game studio, with Avalanche Studios, who are the Just Cause people. And then finally, WB Games Montreal, who are the Arkham Origins and Gotham Knights people. So right now, what's going on with these negotiations is deals have been, as you mentioned, deals have been made with recording industry, streaming networks, and others. Video game industry is the one that seems to be digging its heels in. This is the first event following declaration of the strike last week, which was declared after 18 months of negotiations that SAG-AFTRA has had going on with these particular studios who represent the gaming industry. Members from other entertainment unions attended this strike to show their support. Support for SAG-AFTRA. And so one of the things that we see a dynamic developing here, kind of like the one that led to the concurrent actors and writers strikes in Hollywood, because that really had its origins in the camaraderie that was shown between the different unions for their peer groups who were also striking, often for the same reasons. And we're starting to see that gather momentum in the gaming industry as well. Various members of SAG-AFTRA mentioned how the camaraderie, both intra and extra union, have been encouraging and motivated them to continue and now escalate the fight. The main reason AI is considered an even bigger threat in the video game industry is because the technology and skill set to replicate human likenesses and performances is innate and organic to the software developers and tools and applications they use in game development. So in the movie and entertainment industry, those skill sets and tools and domain expertise, I'm going to go ahead and just repeat this video while we're going through this, are not organic, right? They're kind of an adjacency or a transplant. And Otacon Ocelot's in the chat. So what's up, Otacon? Thanks very much for coming through. We appreciate you, as always. But in video games, it's part of the DNA of video games, right? That those software development skills are directly part of what they do in video games. And so the union, SAG-AFTRA, actually considers AI and its use to replicate, in particular, voices, as well as motion capture performances. They consider that to be a more significant threat than they even did in the movie discussions that went on. It is more directly part of the inherent nature of what the games industry does than even Hollywood, which, as I mentioned, which has onboarded those skills and tools into its production pipeline and is still dealing with orienting it into the workflow in the pipeline. So again, much more tightly coupled and much more interwoven into what video game developers do. The union believes that there is a concerted effort to increase the fidelity of the simulation in the hopes of largely eliminating the need of human actors. So what the union sees is they see the activities that are going on, they see the moves that are being made in the video games industry, and they are absolutely convinced. You get things like, you get the things that Andrew Wilson says about EA, you get some of the things that some of the other executives have said, but then, but the thing I appreciate from Strauss and Take-Two in their statements are, there is no question about that. I know what my relationship is with them. I don't get these disingenuine, I'm your buddy kind of statements. It is very explicitly clear, right, what's going on with Take-Two. But you get statements from him that say, people who are talking about AI, taking over like 50% of the production of video games are really fooling themselves. Otacon mentions, people say nowadays music genres sound the same. Just wait till voice-trained AI plagues most game characters if this doesn't get through. Exactly. The industry says that they have proposed reasonable terms. So I'm just going to blow up my text here on my script so it's a little easier for me to read. The industry says that they have proposed reasonable the industry, so including increased pay, but SAG-AFTRA says that the play-action fake is in who the industry is classifying as a performer. They're trying to say that there is a classification of actor that they would characterize as simply data, likely meaning that they would arbitrarily code some contract jobs as not actual performances, but people who are providing an input service to a data model. And then you would not be protected from having that input reused as the company saw fit. It would just be like outsourcing code right to another studio, and the auspices of that contract or subcontract would be that once you submit that code, then the buyer then owns that code and can reuse it and repurpose it as it sees fit. Then you would not be protected from having that input reused as the company saw it as many times as saw it in multiple properties, multiple games, without ever having to pay you again. And that's the big thing, is that what really bothers the performers is that you want to capture my likeness and you want to reuse it. And I think in a lot of cases, these performers would be okay if they would get paid for it. It would be like a royalty. It would just be like rerunning the show, and like actors in Hollywood get paid when their shows go into syndication, and then you get what's called a residual. But the problem is that what they feel is going to happen is that they're not going to get residuals and they're not going to get royalties. People are just going to, harvest those data models, put them in some big data warehouse, and reuse them. And, there won't even be traceability to the original actor who did that performance. I would guess that those categorizations would fly loose and wild and be highly arbitrary. And we would eventually get to a point where a game would only have 1 to 3 live paid actors in it, with everything else being a data model. When you think about games like a GTA or Watch Dogs or a Bethesda game which are populated with hundreds, sometimes thousands of NPCs, this problem can be seen as significant when it starts occurring at scale. It especially exacerbates the problem where in the entertainment and union dynamic, you only qualify for union-provided health care if you meet the work frequency minimums. And if the available work dries up because the industry is just reusing performances, then we already have, as it stands today, like if you're familiar with like other creator-oriented industries, the one I'll call out here is comic books. We already have numerous stories of tragedy in the comic book industry where there is no publisher-provided healthcare for freelancers. And in the comic book industry, the vast majority of work that gets done to produce comic books are freelancers. We went briefly through an era where Otacon mentions that's messed up, man, for real. And I can't see the one comment, so when it moves up, I'll read it out. But we went through a period of time like with Hickman and some of these other guys where there were kind of franchise. I call it the franchise player era of comic books, where comic book creators were getting exclusive deals with Marvel and DC, and they had kind of gone back to the time where they had a kind of a stable of, in particular, writers, but also some pencilers were also in that group. And those people were then employees of the company, and so they would be afforded, benefits, healthcare, 401ks. But we've kind of passed through that. I don't think there's as much of that, nearly as much going on as there was in probably the early 2000s, I want to say. And again, before then and after, we're back in this state where the vast majority of comic books that are being produced by freelancers. Those freelancers have no health care because they're not employees of actual companies. They're essentially 1099s. They're working on contract to these companies. They don't get any health care. And we've had numerous stories where, somebody, a comic book creator gets a terminal illness, dies, and that person's, often, it's obviously, there's women who work in the comic book industry, but it seems like many of these stories are from men who have died and have left behind, wives and children. And many times those people have to turn to a GoFundMe or something like that, often to pay for the health care of that person who's become an invalid, or just to make ends meet, after that person has passed away, because again, they don't get benefits, so they weren't stocking away savings like in a 401k. And as I also mentioned, in this day of like the gig economy and YouTubers, the big thing about being a YouTuber is there is no health plan for a YouTuber, right? Lots of people like to talk about going, streaming, full time. I mean, there is no healthcare, there is no 401k. So, your ability to plan for the future is obviously, impinges when you go that route, and then you have no protection. So, what these people in the union are very concerned about is the union can provide healthcare, but you have to work a certain minimum amount. And again, that will come under threat under the presence of AI. So like I said, we already have numerous stories of tragedy in the comic book industry where there is no publisher provided healthcare for freelancers, which is the bulk of the industry, so creators have to obtain their own insurance plan. And many don't because their earnings are barely enough for them to make ends meet. The industry says they are still participating in ongoing negotiations, back to the gaming industry. The industry says they are still participating in ongoing negotiations because they want to make it work and get to a solution, claiming that is an indication that they do not want to abandon the union and its members participating in video game production. So it's a very, again, small silver lining that, at least the industry is still at the table. This matter of AI is actually Article 25 of a 25-article agreement between the industry and the union, and pretty much the other 24 have supposedly already been agreed upon by both parties. So let's hope we can get to done on this last one and not encounter a drought of content across the video game industry like we did in Hollywood that resulted in things like the Emmys being delayed, the Tonys going on time but without union participation, movies as big as MCU titles being pushed out as much as a year or more, including things like Captain America, Brave New World, and Avengers, Doomsday, and Secret Wars, and television show seasons missing an entire given year, and production starting late, such as Cobra Kai, The Last of Us, where production was halted, or writing was suspended, or even getting canceled with personnel being fired and production being rebooted like Daredevil Born Again. So when Daredevil Born Again screeched to a halt, eventually that writer, I think the writer and the director were actually both eventually let go, and that thing just started over entirely. So, I mean, what we don't want to get into is where we're on the heels of, getting out of the pandemic and the impact it had on some companies' production pipelines, although I think there are some companies who figured it out and recovered. But in general, we see, I mean, almost across the board, we do see various kind of sliding planes of where there was some impact. Some publishers kept pace, on the outside, on the backside of the pandemic. But then their production pipelines eventually bogged down once they got that stuff that they had in the pipeline during the pandemic out. And then we had other publishers who really got knocked to kilter by the pandemic, and there was kind of a drought in their production pipeline, and they're just now recovering. So even with PlayStation, I think, doing pretty well through the pandemic and getting titles out, the problem has become that they seem to be going through a bit of a drought now here after, the first few years of the generation. Then in contrast, you look at Xbox, where they had problems getting things out during the pandemic. Now, granted, admittedly, through acquisitions, they seem to have, largely recovered from that and are maybe getting back to a point where they can be on regular release cadence. But regardless, either way, people have been impacted and production pipelines have been impacted. So, let's hope we don't get a double whammy like we did with Hollywood. Participants in the strike numbered over 300 and included not just native video game performers, but hybrid performers that also work in Hollywood. Companies on the side of the industry negotiations include Activision, Walt Disney, Electronic Arts, Insomniac, Take-Two Productions, and of course, the mentioned WB Games. So, just wanted to kind of put that out. I also wanted to bring, attract attention to, that's not the one I wanted to make go away. also wanted to draw attention to that video and make sure people knew that was out there. And like I said, I highly encourage you go consume that whole thing. Hopefully YouTube doesn't give me flack about playing that video in the background. Want to go on to the next news story, and I'm going to take a break here to grab something to drink. E-Nate, thanks very much for coming through. We appreciate you as always. Otacon says, yes, they would too. And I think he was talking about the things that I said SAG-AFTRA was worried about that the industry would try to pull. Again, agreeing that, he probably thinks that the sneaky bastards would probably try and do exactly that. E-Nate mentions that, this doesn't surprise me. They have to nail this issue down while it's still early before it gets out of control. Yeah, absolutely, E-Nate. So like I said, give me a second to kind of move things around and pull up this other article. And get something to drink. Okay, very parched day. Hopefully the coconut water gets me rehydrated a lot faster than normal. Otacon Ocelot, I want an ice cream sandwich. Watching Logic podcast. Yeah, this is the Elgato Wave 3, I think, is the SKU. So yeah, very happy with it. And Elgato did give me. I'm on their email distribution list, so sometimes I get an early heads up when things are coming out, and so I got the early heads up that they were putting out white mics, and I quickly grabbed one. So E-Nate says, I just the homie went live and decided to come through. I'm in between help desk tickets and going for the platinum on Super Robot Wars. Okay, so we're gonna get on to just talk about the THQ showcase. And I actually need to bring back the web capture. Like I said, I'm way discombobulated because just with all the video, I'm having to really. I probably should have set this up with my regular live stream overlay, because with the video, it's just like me playing the game in the background. I would have just put my webcam over it, but kind of going back and forth. Okay, so we'll go ahead and scroll and let this video roll, and I'll probably just put this on repeat while we're going through it. Okay, Otacon says they're dope. Sounds great. I remember when Eden says, I remember when you mentioned wanting the white Wave 3, and that is very true. Yeah, Wave 3 is one of the best sounding USB mics. Yeah, I mean, over the years, like I've kind of gotten tired of USB mics and not very happy with them, and kind of shifted to like all XLR. I have fewer XLR mics than I have USB mics, but I've definitely shifted to where, in general, I'll always do a podcast on an XLR mic, and I'll still use the USB mic sometimes for my live stream setups and Let's Plays. But the Wave 3 is the one USB mic that I will use for podcasting, and also because it integrates a mixer into the mic itself, so it gives me the same control as what I'm using my my Go XLR or my Go XLR Mini. That's a really short trailer. A new Darksiders is coming, and after a Zelda-style adventure, a loot-driven ARPG, a Souls-like, and a Diablo-esque hack and slash, nobody knows what to expect. And I thought I had this article up, but apparently I don't. So this article over on Games Radar by Dustin Bailey. It's official, a new Darksiders game is on the way. Series fans are already celebrating, but the announcement teaser was so vague that nobody is quite sure what to expect. As you can see here playing in the background, it literally lasts 60 seconds. You can check out the teaser video below, or just enjoy the description that publisher THQ Nordic provided to the Xbox Wire blog. The foreboding rumble of caverns, eons old, embers swirl through the air, cast up from pools of bubbling lava. Three enormous heads hewn from otherworldly stone suddenly burst into life with mystical flame. The charred council roar a single word in unison, horseman. Nope, I don't want to do that. Okay, the reveal trailer doesn't really give us much to go on. I'm going to keep... in fact, I'm going to stop playing on repeat because, like I said, I don't know that YouTube's not going to get all bent out of shape about me playing other people's videos in the background. So we'll kill that for a little bit. And I'll just talk to you guys. Once I, of course, get my script back up on the screen. The reveal trailer doesn't really give us much to go on, but the studio says that it won't be long until they tell us more, which seems to kind of be the theme going around the industry. I think Randy Pitchford said the exact same thing about a recent earnings call, maybe, where Borderlands was mentioned. Darksiders has been around since 2010, and since the launch of the first game in the series, which focused on the Horseman War. There have been 3 other games in the series since then, each one taking a slightly or significantly different design than the others before it. The developer making Darksiders 4 is Gunfire Games. Their last chapter in the series was Darksiders 3. The game that followed that one was not Darksiders 4, but was instead called Darksiders Genesis. What concerns me about this game is that the Darksiders series is one that stands out for me as one I remember people would use as a reference, journalists would use as a reference when they talked about the comeback and death of the AA game space. So very often, in fact, I say it as well, when we have this recurring theme going around that people say, well, we just need to bring AA games back. I'm like, guys, there's a reason we don't have AA games. Because when the industry made AA games in groves, you guys didn't buy it. And that's why we don't have them. Because publishers say, I'm not going to invest the money in making a AA game when no one's going to buy it. And yeah, and the cliche that I often use is just look at Darksiders. And it's not just me, it's journalists as well. So while the OG Darksiders 2010 sold close to 3.5 million copies, each iteration thereafter has encountered a significant drop-off in sales numbers, reflecting how challenging it has become to sell mid-tier content. And by mid-tier, I don't mean mid, like the kids utilize today. I mean lower budgeted software. So, when AAA games have budgets of, upwards of 100 million, and we're kind of settling on, high 100, so 150, 60, 70, 80, 200 million. And then you get things like Spider-Man with a $300 million budget. That's what I mean. In contrast to, mid-tier content would be content with like a budget of 100 million or thereabouts, or just, slightly south or north. Darksiders 2, which came out in 2012, sold 1.4 million copies. Darksiders 3 in 2018 sold 364,000 copies on Steam. So my estimation is that they probably didn't sell more than 1.45 million total through a retail. And probably just a little south of that, coming in under Darksiders 2. And then Darksiders Genesis sold 316,000 on Steam. So I'd probably put that at about 1.2 million. So again, this was the value proposition that THQ, who was putting these in. And remember, THQ themselves, original THQ, went bankrupt. And one of the things that people pointed to was that because, Darksiders 2 AA content, which is the type of content that they put out, the type of content Embracer puts out, is arguably not enough to really sustain a competitive business these days. You have Activision. They get by on Call of Duty and big franchises from Blizzard, World of Warcraft, and Overwatch. You have EA, which really gets by on the strength of its sports games. That's really what pays the bills for everyone else and allows them to go out and build other content. So it just gets really tough when you're doing kind of AA stuff. Otacon also says, is there a cheaper one like that for future reference? Yeah, I'll have to go and see, Otacon. I will research that and hopefully talk about that next time I'm on air. Enate says, I'm shocked the new Darksiders is coming. I know a lot of people seem to like them. However, they always seem to go on sale pretty fast. Assad says, I haven't played any of the Darksiders. AAA Braps. No offense, Brap, if you're in the chat. I do play a good bit of AA games. I just don't finish them. Yeah, and so, it's tough. I mean, like I said, people clamor for them, but we see that the sales in the industry don't really prove that out as being a viable way to go. One of the things that made the first game so successful was that there were a huge number of known names that were attached to the project, both from games as well as Hollywood live action and well-known animated properties. So the first Darksiders, I was really amazed when I went back and looked at their IMDb. The first Darksiders had Troy Baker, Fred Tatasciore, who does just a ton of like big animated properties. Mark Hamill, Moon Bloodgood, Phil Lamar, and Keith. I always screw up pronouncing his name. Sarabashka. And I knew Sarabashka from the extended stint that he did on one of my favorite television shows, Angel. He was the antagonist and the villain for I think like maybe 2 seasons running as a vampire hunter. But he's gone on and done other stuff as well. In 2019, Darksiders 3 drove a 38% year-over-year increase in sales to $38 million and was able to, and THQ was able to recoup, and the title was able to recoup the money spent on both development and marketing in its first 45 days on the market. But the series does show some remarkable potential and resilience, especially when the series has past performance, such as it did in 2012, when Darksiders 2 outsold Madden NFL in total units sold in the month of August. So, like I said, Darksiders is a title that we point to as kind of like as the example child of, hey, this is why people don't do AAA. But it did have spot moments in the sun. Most of those times were like a month. And so, you could pick 1 month, in the slice of across, the 4 or 5 years of the franchise, longer than that when you talk about how stretched out the games are in the releases. But for each one of those things, there was an example where like they were high on the hog for 1 month and like beat, other titles on the market, or actually in this case, like I said, took down, one of the big boys, in terms of Madden NFL. So a couple more comments in the chat. I don't know why my chat is disconnecting and connecting. I got one I know from PSN at some point. I own all the Darksiders, but I've never finished a single one. Yep. Yeah, that's kind of the problem that I'm talking about. Yeah, no, I mean, and Darksiders has at some point been free, or somewhere on PlayStation Plus, or back when we had Xbox Live Gold as one of the giveaway games. I want to go through a few other videos. I really wanted to make sure kind of people thought about this, because I think there was a deluge of news last week, and I think in all the hubbub about Bungie and some of the other big news stories that we definitely lost sight of the THQ Nordic showcase. So I'm just going to hop to a few of the things that really stood out that I'm really particularly interested in. And again, I've got to move all this stuff around. Okay, so now we got me in the corner, and hopefully I can bring the video right in. Okay, so this is the first one, I think, and this is Outcast: A New Beginning. So the THQ showcase was a little weird to me, because some of the games that were shown were games that are actually already out. In the case of one of them, came out last year. But this is what you do when you're THQ, and you're not in the zeitgeist, and you're not necessarily at the top of the food chain getting people to pay a lot of attention to your games. You take the one opportunity that you have, and maybe this is why they decided to do their showcase in August, to give themselves some breathing room and some space away from everything that went down at Summer Games Fest and the Xbox showcase and everything else that happened in June, and just put stuff on kind of a time delay and do it in August. But it wouldn't do me much good to hit play in OBS, would it? Because the YouTube video will not actually play. So this is this is just actually the ticker tape of the whole digital showcase. So we don't want to watch that. I don't think we want to watch that. I don't know why I'm not getting. Okay, hopefully this is Outcast. I think it's Outcast. Yes. Okay. So this is Outcast: A New Beginning. So I can't run down the entirety of the history of Outcast, but Outcast was an older game that was out, I think, in the early 2000s. It was primarily a PC game. I think eventually it got ported to other things, but it's kind of one of those games that I almost want to put it kind of like in the Serious Sam bucket, where PC gamers like knew about the title. It had a cult following. It was well known. but it just never blew up. It became like super big, like Half-Life or some of these other titles. But it features this jetpack mechanic, which just makes it awesome. And I personally never got around to playing Outcast. It may have actually been a late '90s game. I can't remember exactly the history, but it was definitely one that probably there were a lot of people's PCs who were not up to snuff to playing it. But like I said, it was a cult classic. It had a cult following, and its sequel is back. And actually, its sequel came out in March, I believe. So this is a game that's already out, but for whatever reason, THQ featured it in its showcase, which is fine because I guess not a lot of people have played it just yet. It has a mostly positive rating on Steam, so it's doing well there. I'm super excited about this. I have this game wishlisted. I just haven't had time to get back around to it yet. I think most people who know me know that I've been playing a lot of turn-based JRPGs this year, but then I'm still chewing on things like Baldur's Gate, and those turn-based RPGs are like huge, right, in terms of scope and scale. And I've picked up EA Sports College Football as well, but I have been chewing through things on my Steam wish list. This is definitely one that now, since the showcase has gone down, has super piqued my interest. It really gives me Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora vibes, with actually visuals that seem like a little cleaner, even. And it's funny because I'm playing Star Wars Bounty Hunter, and Star Wars Bounty Hunter has a jetpack mechanic as well, but it's very kind of limited and subdued. Anthem had a jetpack mechanic, but even its jetpack mechanic wasn't doing things that this guy did. Like this guy's like thousands of feet up in the air, flying with his jetpack, free flying. So it's good to see this thing during the showcase. Even though, like I said, it's kind of weird that the game's out, but they showed it. But hey, that's fine. You do what you got to do when you are when you're THQ. No rhyme was intended on that. Another game that showed up. There were also some weirdisms where there were games that there were news articles about that people said were part of the showcase, but then when I actually go to the video showcase and roll tape, like those games aren't in there. So I don't know if they were announced like off camera somewhere or what. So try to make sure that I have the right. It also doesn't help that I have like a black theme in Chrome now, so I can't tell the difference between the tabs. So this is another game that was shown. This is Recreation, which evokes a lot of kind of. When I saw this trailer come up, like I said, I'm a big Ubisoft stan, so one of the games that I have a long history with is Trackmania. I thought this was a Trackmania game. When it showed up, I was like, this really looks like a lot like Trackmania. I'm like, is this THQ's attempt to do a Trackmania? And in some ways, it kind of is. It looks like it takes a little bit of the Trackmania vibe, and then combines it, I guess, with maybe a wrecking car mechanic. So maybe it's got like Burnout vibes in it too. I'm not sure. The Recreation may just be a reference to, as users create lots of crazy tracks, you're just going to have a lot of wrecks that pile up. So that may be it as well. One of the things that to me is dangerous about a game like this is its heavy dependence on UGC, on user-generated content. And UGC has a tendency to do one of two things. It either just blows up, like in the case of Minecraft and Roblox, or it is an Achilles heel that really constrains and limits a game's opportunity to be successful. It sometimes becomes super heavily dependent upon the releasing studio because typically the studio also releases content. So like with Trackmania, yes, people create tracks, but then the studio is also responsible for periodically putting out updated content that creates really the bulk of what people play. And I think and I'm not as familiar with Nintendo properties, but I think like Super Mario or Paper Mario is one that relies on UGC as well. But just the thing is, my thing always with those games is like I'm just not dumpster diving through UGC because there tends to be like 88% of things that are bad, and 12% of things, and sometimes, the developer really has to put in good filters that allow the cream of the crop to rise to the top. Otherwise, it's just not worth my time to spelunk, all the caves of user-generated content. That's one of the problems. I mean, one of my problems personally in utilizing Forge in Halo. I've just never bothered to do it because, like I said, I'm not investing my time in trying to demo and play maps, to find out which ones are the good ones. But this one, like I said, gives off that Trackmania vibes, has UGC, so it's super interesting. This looks cool. Didn't watch THQ. I keep forgetting. Yeah. No, I know it's a showcase that not a lot of people are gonna find the time to get around to. This is bar none probably my favorite announcement from the showcase. Just a franchise, now a franchise that I've been in love with since the beginning. And I mentioned this on E2KG. If you're, and I think the article that we covered on E2KG talked about, if you ask somebody about an action RPG, to provide you an example, the one you're more than likely to get back from everyone is Diablo, and then a close second will be this one, will be Titan Quest, and it gets same thing as kind of Outcast, right? Cult following, it's one of those games that lots of people know, but not a lot of people have played, maybe necessarily. The game has been ported to the Nintendo Switch. I have it there. I believe the game is playable on Steam Deck, so I think you get a pretty healthy number of people playing this game as a handheld title. But it's one that I fell in love with because I love Greek mythology, and it treads on that. And then again, it's an action RPG with a heavy loot-oriented mechanic like Diablo. So here we are with Titanfall 2 coming back. What's interesting is, yet again, this is a trailer that doesn't really tell you anything whatsoever about what the game is. We're pretty familiar with what the Titanfall mechanic is. You're gonna get an action RPG in that same type of 3D isometric view, looking down at an angle. It's just a matter of kind of what story you're going to get and whether or not it's going to be super engaging. I actually recently picked up the port on Nintendo Switch this year, and I've played it with me a couple times that I've been on travel. But yeah, I'm looking very forward to this one as well. I don't think most of these games had release dates that came out of the showcase, so it's anybody's guess when this thing is coming. So we'll just have to see. And while this is playing on, I'm gonna grab something else to drink. So it looks like maybe that was your hero there, down on the ground. Looked like maybe he was recovering and was going to rise up and become the champion that people need in their time. Next game that I want to take a look at. Actually, I don't think I have another. Oh, I do have another video. Just want to mention a couple of the other titles that came up. Last Train Home, which is a game that is out. Actually, that's the game that came out last November. It's super interesting. It's a game about a Soviet company, I think, maybe battalion, on their way back from the war front after the ending of World War II, showing that a lot of these times when troops were withdrawing, like, they weren't out of danger, right? It was a fight to get back home. So that's kind of what the topic is. It kind of neatly incorporates this mechanic where you have to, fight with your units that you have, but you also have to take care of the train. And so kind of the care and feeding in the progression system is also wrapped around your train as well as an endemic kind of character, sixth man on the court in this game. So I have that one wishlisted. It's definitely one that I want to get back, take a look at. They showed Trine 5, A Clockwork Conspiracy, which is a co-op 2D side-scrolling game. I'm not sure where that's going, but it was shown during the showcase on the Nintendo Switch. So that one looked kind of interesting. There's a game called Space for Sale, which is like a interstellar real estate game with kind of Hello Games with No Man's Sky style graphics. So that one looked interesting. There's a Gothic 1 remake for people who are familiar with games like Gothic. Another game that I associate with Gothic when I think of it is Wizardry, which also just got a remake, I think last fall. That's getting a remake. Tempest Rising, which I think that one is a horror Oh no. So Tempest Rising, game that I'm definitely interested in seeing more about. We kind of got a lot of like a cinematic trailer, and so it's kind of tough for me to tell exactly entire what it's a game. But it feels like a very kind of like Command and Conquer style RTS that's set in the near future. I think it's from the studio that made. Gosh, I can't remember the name, but there was like a steampunkish game that just got made. RTS that just got made last year, maybe the year before, came out to not really good reviews, but it's been a game that studio has kept that, and it's kind of turned the corner with the Steam community. It's slipping my mind now what the title is. But that looked good. And then TMNT, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Last Ronin, is another title that's coming out from THQ. The Last Ronin. I'm a comic book guy, but that's a mini series that I missed. But I have heard of it and am familiar with it. It's like I've talked about a lot of titles. It's a thing that's well known, but I haven't particularly personally read. But that game, that property, that miniseries, that comic book miniseries is getting a video game translation. So that looks interesting, and I know that there's lots of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle stands in the community. The last thing that I mentioned is so Titanfall was one of the games that it was an announcement out of the showcase, but it's not part of the archive reel of the showcase. Really weird. One other one, Otacon Ocelot mentions, I'm 100% glad there has been a resurgence of boomer shooters. The Turok remasters and Doom games and various others I've been switching around in and out lately. Yeah, one of the games I started last night was Doom 2016. I've played it on the Nintendo Switch and on PlayStation, but I apparently I have it in my Steam library, but I hadn't played the PC version. So I started the PC version of it last night. It's so awesome. That's still my favorite, modern era Doom game. Very much more so than Doom Eternal. And this is one of the games that I'm looking to as well. This is kind of the last trailer that I want to show from the showcase. This was the Wreckfest 2 announcement trailer. Again, another one that was supposedly an announcement out of the showcase, but it's not part of their reel on their YouTube channel. And this is one where actually, I mean, there's some in cockpit gameplay shown, but like really not a lot of the gameplay. It's really much more so a cinematic trailer. But apparently this thing is going to have a deeper career mode and progression system. It's going to have more detailed upgrades that are available. They're going to be much more atomic and much more specific within a single given car. So each individual car now will have a more detailed upgrade path that it'll go to. So yeah, looking forward to it. Again, there's not too much to tell about Wreckfest. It's a smash 'em up car game. So you get different tracks. You get the thing that's interesting about Wreckfest is it has pure demolition events where, yes, you're running laps, but like really the whole point is to wreck the other cars. And then it has events that feel like more traditional races where, on some tracks there's like no crisscross, so there's like no opportunity to wreck a car as like a deliberate activity. But even in those races, it's rubbing his racing like to the extreme. So, again, whacking it, knocking a car completely off track is completely allowable. Otacon says, "Oh, my son will want this. If he sees this, he will yell for it." Oh, there's a playground type mode. Yeah, they have some modes that are specifically for running wrecks. At a risk, I'm gonna go ahead and close that out entirely. I think that was the last video that I want to show. So try to get myself back center screen here. I'm going to take another break, and then we're going to get on to the ending of the show and talk some financials. So give me just 1 second. All right, sorry. So I know there's a bit of a delay, but crisscrossing back and forth between the video, and I tried bringing the video in as its own source, but one of the things I hate about YouTube is when you bring video in now as its own source, as a browser source with its own URL. The unfortunate thing is you get the stinking YouTube, like Prime YouTube, like pop-up ad in the lower corner, and you can't turn that off inside OBS, so it winds up blocking part of what you're trying to show. So let's go ahead and talk about earnings. Nintendo profits fall 55% as people save their cash for the Switch 2. This story over on Engadget by Mariella Moon. People are so excited for the next-gen Switch, they're likely holding off on buying Nintendo's current consoles and games. At least that's what the company's latest earnings report seems to indicate. For the quarter ending on June 30th, Nintendo posted a net profit of 80.9 billion Japanese yen, and I had done that conversion over here. So that's about $557 million. And that is higher than its forecast, but over 50% lower than its net profit for the same period last fiscal year. So year over year, they're down 55%. In addition, the company said it only sold 2.1 million Switch consoles for the quarter. That means it experienced a 46.3% decline on unit sales year over year. Even its games didn't sell well, seeing as Nintendo posted a software sales figure that's 41.3% lower than last fiscal year at 30.64 million units sold. So one thing to keep in mind is that last year was a big year for Nintendo. So we kind of talk about this when we talk about the running narrative that, when I look at 2023, the claim that the industry didn't grow. And I'm like, okay, because you're isolating your view to 2023, which was the full year like after the pandemic in 2022, where we were still in the vestiges of the pandemic and we were still in the tail end of kind of Bonga sales and revenue. And then you look at the year after that, where kind of the bottom dropped out of the market, and you say, well, we didn't grow. And I'm kind of like, well, no crap, given the 2 years that you're looking at. That is kind of the same dynamic here for 2024. In comparison, right? Well, when you isolate to the quarter and you look at what was going on last year, the same quarter, last year you had Tears of the Kingdom. And in addition to that, you also had the Super Mario movie, which really drew a lot of attention to Nintendo IP, made people go out, and lots of people go out and buy Nintendo Switches. So like I said, you had titles like Tears of the Kingdom and the Super Mario movie helped draw a lot of attention to the Nintendo IP, as well as fueled hardware sales itself. It's also most of the market's assessment that the impending release of the Switch 2 has had a chilling effect on Switch sales, especially for a console as long in the tooth as the Nintendo Switch, which originally launched in March of 2017. So it's been 155 days since the Switch hit its 7-year anniversary. So it launched in March, I want to say 3rd of 2017. So it's just 5 months. It's now going on 7.5 years old. As long in the tooth as the Switch is, however, it is still likely that it won't supersede the Xbox 360's time in the seat as the primary console for its brand, a position it held for 8 years to the day. So the Xbox 360 launched November, I want to say 22nd of 2005, and the Xbox One actually launched on the exact same day, November 22nd, 2013. So just a reminder that, yes, very often we complain about about Nintendo being about the Switch being on the market so long, but just a reminder that actually, the 360 was on board was on the market for longer. Sorry, and I didn't realize my webcam underlay under the OBS overlay was all out of alignment. So yeah, so that's Nintendo earnings. Tail of the tape is that they're down year over year. Is that to be unexpected? I don't feel like that's unexpected. Maybe the degree to which they were. You're also getting a lot of noise today, which I haven't covered, where there's some feeling by the rich that we're heading for a recession, and that indicators have finally turned the corner and hit the tip over point to where this will they, won't they, off again, on again type of two-step foxtrot dance that the Fed has been doing. And a lot of analysts have been doing, say that now we're hitting the tip over point where there is really going to be a recession, and everybody flipped out because Warren Buffett sold 277 million, I think, of his stock. So I don't look. the rich have a hypersensitivity to be concerned about money because they have the most of it to lose. But that means that any small action by them gets exploded, right? Sometimes maybe beyond the point of significance and relevance that maybe people think that it is. But there were big market sell-offs in Japan, especially in the Nikkei index, which really hit all of the video game publishers and Japanese companies over there. And you see things like that going on in the New York Stock Exchange as well. Heading towards the end of the day, I want to say it looked like people were starting to calm down. So I don't know that it's as serious as some think it is. But we'll see. The only thing I can say is, maybe it's not the feeling of impending doom that was being announced at like 8:00 this morning as the markets opened. But again, we'll see. Okay, and then let's go ahead and wrap it up by talking about EA financials. It's weird that this web page is I guess the width of the article is slightly different. Okay, hopefully that doesn't break the bank too much on visibility. So Electronic Arts first quarter 2025 earnings beats expectations. So we're going to start with this rundown over at Simply Wall Street. EA first quarter 2025 results, key financials. Revenue in the U.S. revenue was $1.66 billion, which is down 14% year over year. Quarter to quarter. I don't know why they're reporting Q over Q, but that's fine. 1.66 billion down from first quarter of 2024. Net income was 280 million, down 30% from Q1 2024. So net income being what people probably really mean when they refer to profit. So it's income after expenses are removed. Profit margin 17%. Down from 21% Q1 2024. Decrease in margin was driven by lower revenue. Earnings per share, US $1.05 per share. So they beat expectations. Revenue exceeded analyst estimates by 3%. Earnings per share also surpassed analyst estimates by 18%. Looking ahead, revenue is forecast to grow 5.3% on average during the next 3 years, compared to an 8.5% growth forecast for the entertainment industry in the U.S. So, by and large, the tale of the tape there is that people were pretty happy. Wall Street was pretty happy with EA's performance. Electronic Arts reports strong Q1 FY25 results, revenue down, income up year over year. EA today announced preliminary financial results for its first quarter ended June 30th, 2024. EA delivered a strong start to FY25, beating net bookings guidance as we continue to execute across our business, said Andrew Wilson, CEO of EA. Our focus on delivering bigger, bolder, and more connected experiences for our players has never been sharper, and is illustrated by the record-breaking launch of EA Sports College Football 25. I talked about that on Enough to Keep Going, that they hit 5 million players out of that first early access weekend and first weekend. Just want to go over some of the kind of big numbers here that may not be showing up with the full width. So I think we're going to have to break protocol here a little bit to kind of get that on the screen. So EA Sports Men NFL grew net bookings by double digits year over year in Q1. And so net bookings are a financial term that's used to reference that it's not cash brought in, it's not revenue brought in. It actually includes advanced orders, so it could be orders that have been made but not fulfilled, but those commitments have been made by companies making those purchases. Supply chain stock buys by like GameStop and things like that. $5.3 billion in live service TTM is trailing 12 months net bookings, which means they're looking at financial performance over the last 12 months and kind of processing it in a rolling wave moving forward. Sometimes that's done because the quarter over quarter results may not be the story that they want to tell to Wall Street. Maybe because that SKU makes them look financially healthier or look like the gains have been larger, or there's been less disruption in the consistency of their earnings. So there's various reasons why a company might report trailing 12-month instead of just year over year as a linear number. EA Sports Football Club Mobile reported record net bookings for Q1, $7.1 billion for total TTM net bookings. Live services represented 75% of total TTM net bookings. So, as I mentioned before on other podcasts, that's again look, EA, quite clear that EA is a live service business now, less so a single player. So we give EA a lot of flack for things like Jedi Survivor, Jedi Fallen Order, for that game coming back, the single player campaign of Titanfall 2. And we say, hey, see, look, you don't have to do everything as a live service. You don't have to do everything multiplayer. Those single player game experiences work too. But again, 75% rate of the money that they're making is coming from live services. So you kind of expect that the company's going to do what the company's going to do. $1.9 billion trailing 12-month cash flow. I think net bookings, I'm not really worried as much about looking at that. I do want to pull back up net bookings by platform because we talked about this a little bit on Enough to Keep Going as well. But I do want to mention it here. This whole thing about consoles are growing, death of the console. You've got to put your game on every platform. Okay, maybe. But the point is, when you look at EA, one of the largest, if not the largest, third-party publisher on the map, particularly now that Activision has been gobbled up by Microsoft, by Xbox. They're one of the largest third-party publishers standing alone. I'm going to slide Tencent out of that conversation. Maybe NetEase out of that conversation too, although I think they're below EA. I can't remember exactly where they slot just yet. But as we look here at EA's earnings, right, what we clearly see is that the vast majority of their business comes from console. They participate in console, they participate in PC and other, and they participate in mobile. And you see mobile, which, again, the running narrative is that, mobile is huge. And I get it, mobile as a subsector of the market is the largest sector of the market. But again, you look at the key player here being one of your core traditional gaming publishers and gaming companies. Again, when you look at Activision, you're going to see that number different. You are going to see, the big part of the Activision portfolio coming from King and coming from mobile. But when you look at EA, the vast majority of their money comes from console. You can see that there in the top darker color in the graph, whereas mobile is the skinnier number down at the bottom. And I think these percentages don't necessarily. I think those percentages are maybe growth percentages, but they're not. I wish they had the percentage breakdown across the three subsectors, but I don't think that's what those numbers are. But that's, again, you can see the distribution of their business. It mentions they got good results actually creating a game from the ground up. They had lots of things fans actually wanted. Who would have fucking Yeah, well, these numbers don't have the EA Sports college football numbers in them, and I think that's what you're talking about because the big difference, EA college sports football, or before it used to be called NCAA football, was historically it was kind of the Turn 10 playground games kind of situation, with Turn 10 making an engine and putting out Forza Motorsport, and then the following year Playground puts out a Forza Horizon that uses the engine from the Turn 10 game. And NCAA football always historically used the engine from the previous year's Madden game, but this year's EA Sports College Football actually was their own engine, as far as I understand. I'm sure it reused bits of code, but these financial results don't yet include that. So I think next quarter's will. EA mentions, okay, gotcha. Yeah, I used to play NCAA back then. Yep. Yeah. So I think that's basically all I wanted to go over. I guess maybe the last thing that I'll kind of vamp about a little, even though I didn't necessarily prepare this as far as pre-scripting it goes. But I will talk a little bit about, because Hero Down Under asked earlier today about the ruling in the Google case. And so I think this lawsuit was filed last year, but let's roll tape back even a little bit further. So Lena Khan, the FTC, and gosh, I can't remember his name. I am going to look it up. 'Cause now that's Merrick Garland. It's can't remember the guy's name right off the top of my head. Jonathan Cantor. So Lena Khan's partner over on the on the DOJ side is Jonathan Cantor. The two of them have jointly been engaged in a heavy strategy of litigation with your big six tech companies. Well, now it includes the big six. It was the big five, and NVIDIA had fortunately enjoyed a duration where it was not a target. But I've noticed that at the moment they entered the $1 trillion club, they got on the antitrust division's radar, and they are also now being looked at for antitrust for, I guess, an Israeli AI company that they're looking at acquiring. So the tail of the tape with the DOJ and FTC and under the leadership of these two individuals and antitrust has been, their feeling has been, look, we're not going to get any traction or make any headway by not litigating against people. They're not going to look at these at our organizations as a deterrent to not do things. And they're going to be protected by large, participants of national interest, senators and congressmen. Not all of them, but they're, but largely, antitrust is heavily a partisan matter. Not in all cases. In fact, over the last few years, and in fact, this current program of really going after big tech companies actually started under the Trump administration and has now proceeded on into the Biden administration. Although I think Biden has done more things to directly empower the FTC and the DOJ. But the atmosphere, even under the Trump administration on the Hill, was one that supported the notion of antitrust, or at least going after big tech. And mostly the Republicans were interested in going after big tech because of what they felt was an effort by big tech to suppress conservative voices in social media. But if you go back and you look at sessions of Congress, you will find bills that have been submitted by both parties looking at, in fact, increasing the power of the FTC and the DOJ with their enforcement of antitrust. Not always for the same reasons, sometimes for some really, very, really weird ones, like removing, because sports organizations, for instance, have modified rules for antitrust because they're kind of looked at as natural monopolies. This is one of the things that I researched and came out of the hearings, is that we take the soundbite that monopolies are illegal. Well, actually, they're not. There are actually reasons why some monopolies can be considered legal. There are such things as natural monopolies. There are such things as geographic monopolies. There are instances of monopolies that are apparently nationalized or via government regulation, and those things are considered legal. So it's not just the existence of being a monopoly that makes you illegal. But a big thing is again, a recurring theme has been there has been support for the Fed going after big tech for various reasons, that it does spill across antitrust. And so today, a Judge Mehta, who I can't remember what district he's out of, but did issue a decision that he found that Google had been participating in anti-competitive practices with regards to its search engine. And he looked at the fact that they paid Apple and Samsung to make their search engine the preferred search engine for those two platforms and the default. And in most cases, you kind of have to actually dig in those versions of the operating system. The modification of Android that Samsung does, even beyond just the enabling Google services on top of AOSP. But you look at the things that those companies do within their operating system, and like I said, it could be almost not even transparent to you that you have any other choice, not to use Google as the default, and you really have to dig to change it. But at any rate, he handed down the decision today that he did find that Google had been participating in antitrust practices. That is the decision. What essentially equates to the sentencing. What he's going to do about that is a separate decision that he's going to go through. But that will come here shortly thereafter. And it could include things like saying Google has to break their company up. Now, the going expectation is that that decision will be appealed, and that appeal will be won, or at least that that even after that appeal, win or lose, that this thing is going to go to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court's going to weigh in. Obviously, in the day and times that we live in, the Supreme Court is very conservative and is probably very likely to find in favor of the corporation. But I think that's an easier analysis to make when, if it were that corporation were oil or textile or a motor company. But in these days of big tech, it's really hard to tell where someone is going to come down on the simple basis of conservative versus liberal political leaning. So we'll see how it comes out. But what's absolutely possible is it's possible that this decision could wind up having the same ramifications as the Microsoft antitrust decision of 2001, which, that decision didn't stick. But at the end of the day, there was a settlement out of it, and that did drive Microsoft to have to make some decisions in changing its behavior, changing the way its products were packaged. And in fact, the really interesting thing is, I would definitely concur with the analysis that had that decision in 2001 not been made, we wouldn't have Google today, because Google would have definitely gotten the extend, embrace, extinguish behavior that was the Microsoft norm in the Ballmer years. Right? There was no way in the world that Microsoft would have ever allowed Google to flourish had they not had their behavior curtailed and they not entered this era of extreme fear of further antitrust action. And so Google absolutely existed as $1 trillion company today because we moved into an era where Microsoft essentially had to back off of the way it had behaved in Silicon Valley before. Now we're at a time where those companies who have flourished, Facebook too. There's no way in the world Facebook would have become the thing that it was with Microsoft around. And so now we're in an era where those companies that have flourished as a result of the Microsoft antitrust litigation are entering an era where they themselves are heavily likely to be hounded for antitrust litigation as well. So it's an interesting thing because it may give credence to the notion that the Lina Khan, Jonathan Cantor heavy litigation strategy is working, because it was never, a lot of people gave a lot of air to that their win percentage and things like that. And it was never about win percentages. It was always about deterrent. It was always about building an ICBM, a Minuteman missile that would make companies think, make companies slow down, make companies curtail their pace and curtail their aggressiveness. Phil Spencer talks about the fact that he and the Xbox GLT had no idea that their attention was going to be as drawn to prosecuting the hearings and getting through that. He had no idea that the leadership team would be as distracted. And if you look at the Xbox production pipeline for 2023, there was definitely an impact from that. So, there are definitely companies who have pumped the brakes and slowed down and not gone as aggressive about certain acquisitions as a result of the heavy litigation policies of the antitrust division and FTC. So we will see how that turns out. But I didn't want to cover that as well because Hero Down Under had specifically asked about that. So I think that's going to do it for me tonight. I thank Enate and Otacon so much for coming through. Really appreciate you. I'm sure that there are some people who are going to kind of watch the VOD of this, so I appreciate you as well. If you do come through and watch the recorded version of this, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you can just receive a notification whenever I post new content. Again, I never monetize any of my content. It's simply a matter of making sure you are informed whenever I'm going to go live, again, to make your life easier. And me as well, because then I don't have to post as many notifications all over the place and worry about whether or not anyone's going to see it. So I think that's going to do it for me. I'm going to try and get around to doing a couple of Talking About Games episodes each week. So hopefully we'll see how that goes. Until next time, take care of yourself. Stay safe out there. Play the games that you like. Come here to talk to me about the games that you love. Until next time, my name has been Game Logic for the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube, one of the co-hosts of the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube, as well as one of the co-hosts of the Basement Radio Arcade podcast. Until next time, good night, good luck, and good gaming. That's going to do it for me. I'm out of here.